Well, good evening. You'll have to excuse me getting this computer hooked up again because it went right in there. I had a few changes that I had to make in this, so I couldn't leave it hooked up here. There we go. Okay. I can read my notes as long as it doesn't get too much darker. But if you start hearing me stumbling, that means someone will have to come bring me a light. I have to follow my notes real carefully because what I find when I'm giving open hands presentations is I'm trying to condense about 5 hours of talking into 45 minutes. And I always wonder what all I should say and how I should say it. And invariably, if I don't follow my notes closely, I start telling too many stories and it takes too long. And my wife she tells me all the time, if you go over time, you are not valuing your listeners' time. And you'll probably, as I go through my talk, you'll understand why that is quite important to me right now. So, I don't know how many of you know me. My name is Paul Smucker. You probably, more of you probably know my wife than know me. My wife is Dorcas Smucker. She's the writer. And I am one of the few Mennonite ministers whose wife is better known than they are. And but that is okay with me. My wife does a wonderful job with her writing. I wish she could be here with us this evening, but she has been having some health issues and traveling is difficult for her. She would love to be here. And the second thing is, I was sitting back there on those benches, and I thought, yes, this is the place that I was at 23 or 24 years ago. I was here one other time. How many of you remember the time when the a cappella harmony quartet came and sang at your church? Okay? I was the one that brought them here. And that was the only time that I know of that I've ever been here. I think it was 2001. It might have been 2000, and it might have been 2002. But and your benches are still the same. As followers of God, we are called to make a difference in this world. As I grow older, I'm becoming more and more convinced that making a difference in this world involves how we treat people, by the words we say to them, by our responses to who they are. I try to ask myself, how can I make a difference? How do I help people? Is my helping really helping? How do I make sure that my helping is making a difference? We have, as a church, as Christians, have given lots and lots and lots of money to the poor people around the world. It has done them a lot of good. But one of the consequences of humanitarian aid that is given consistently for a long time is creation of dependency. And you could all probably tell me stories that you know that are not good about dependency on the mission field. Sometimes when we give and when we try to help, we almost cause more problems than we solve. Humanitarian aid is very necessary when there are disasters and when there are either human-caused disasters or climate disasters. Humanitarian aid is very necessary. But the problem of dependency on the mission field is a very real problem. Too often, we think of that problem as it's the poor people's fault. They just shouldn't get dependent on us. My oldest son is 39 years old. When he was 5 years old, he was dependent on me entirely. I took care of him completely, and that's the way God designed it. At 39 years old, he is an engineer working with NASA down in Houston. No longer dependent on me. If he was, whose fault would it be? I see you smiling. It'd be mine. The problem of dependency on the mission field is not those poor people's fault. It's ours. This evening I'm going to tell you a little bit about how savings groups can overcome the problems of dependency. And I hope by the end that you will feel like you have a few tools for how you can make a difference in the world by giving hope. Let's pretend that you and I meet on an elevator, and I'm going to give you the Open Hands elevator speech. Open Hands reaches out to individuals in poverty, not with humanitarian aid, but by training local Christians to facilitate local community groups who save money together. Within savings groups, people with few resources realize they have the ability to save. When they successfully save money, they gain a sense of value and a hope for the future. The opportunity to be a part of a savings group helps them overcome their dependency and regain their dignity. The Open Hands vision is to see the financially vulnerable stabilized, growing, and standing with each other in Christian community. My own vision for this evening is to help you people here in the Northwoods Mennonite Church understand the opportunity that you have to make a difference with people in poverty around the world by learning about savings groups and by learning how you could be involved in helping people in poverty become parts of savings groups. I want to help you understand the positive impact that savings groups have on their members and how the group members learn to restore their relationships with God and with themselves. This restoration brings them to a place of regaining their dignity. They also gain a hope that they can survive without constant help from the North Americans, and they gain a personal sense of value. Watch this video.
Developing countries have tried to solve poverty, and a lot of times we've done this by
God tells the Israelite people over and over again in the Old Testament that they are to help and encourage the poor and treat them not like inferior people, but as people who have value. We read in Deuteronomy 15:11, "For the poor shall never cease out of the land. Therefore I command thee, saying, Thou shalt open thine hand wide unto thy brother, to thy poor, and to thy needy in thy land." We open our hands wide, not just to give financial aid, but to give hope for their life on this earth. Humanitarian aid is a great response for hurricanes, wars, earthquakes, tsunamis, and other natural and man-made disasters, but humanitarian aid will never give hope for the ongoing hardships of life. History tells us that humanitarian aid given too long brings dependency and loss of dignity. Christianity and the Anabaptists have been committed to open our hands to the poor that we encourage on the mission field. We have given many dollars as we try to help them. When dependency develops from our humanitarian aid, we tend to throw up our hands, blame the poor for becoming dependent on us, and think there is nothing we can do to overcome the dependency. Humanitarian aid is necessary, but when the aid continues for too long, it produces dependency, loss of dignity, and hopelessness. And I believe it's our responsibility to do what we can to correct that problem. In 1989, Merle Burkholder, along with his wife Edith and their 3 children, moved from Ontario, Canada, where they were a part of Northern Youth Programs, to the island of Haiti, so Merle could assist the local Haitian pastor. As Merle learned to know the pastor and the Christian Haitians, he became more and more bothered with how the North American missionaries were responding to the poverty in Haiti by trying various kinds of projects that may have worked in Georgia, but seemed to always fail in Haiti. The dependency and loss of dignity needed a solution, but he had no idea where to start. After 18 months, Merle and his family returned to Ontario, Canada. He couldn't ever forget the hopelessness of the poverty he had experienced. After about 15 years, Merle became one of the original board members of Anabaptist Financial. After a year or so, he got up one time in a board meeting and he made a statement and asked a question. He said, "We're giving banking opportunities for rich Anabaptists in North America. What are we going to do for the poor Anabaptists around the world?" He told me that none of the other board members had any idea of what they should do. But they did say, "Merle, we'll give you some resources and you can figure it out." And Merle did. In 2009, Open Hands opened their first savings groups in Haiti and began giving hope for this life to those beset with poverty. When Open Hands first went to Haiti, we asked the missions if we could start savings groups. The missionaries said, "No, it won't work. You can't do savings groups in Haiti. Haitians don't have any money to save, and they have a horrible attitude towards money. It just won't work." Merle very wisely said, "If you let us come down and start savings groups, all you have to do is refer some native Christian Haitians to us, and we will train them. It won't cost your mission any money. It won't cost your mission any of your missionaries' time. And I guarantee you, your churches will benefit." Finally, there was one mission that said, "Okay, you can come and try." And so we went down and trained 2 men to be facilitators, and we started our first groups. The facilitators gathered people together and told them about the savings groups, and each facilitator was able to start one group. Each group that formed chose a leader to lead the meetings, a secretary who recorded attendance, an individual savings, and a treasurer who took care of the money. Each group decided how often they're going to meet, usually once a month or twice a month. Occasionally they decided to meet every week. And then each group would decide how long their saving cycle is going to be. At the end of the saving cycle, all the money that each person put into savings would go back to that person. It's just like, you have your children put their money in their piggy bank. They're not going to want to put their money in their piggy bank forever. They want to get it back sometime. And so you need to have it. You usually set a time when your savings is going to be done. These groups would normally choose a time of the year when they needed money, such as right before school is going to start, when you need to buy school clothes for your children, and you need to buy school supplies and that sort of thing. But each group decides how long the cycle would be. Usually the cycles were somewhere between 6 months and a year. At each meeting, the members give their money to the treasurer. The secretary records the attendance and how much money was saved, and the facilitator has some time in teaching, where they teach about how to save money and teaches various biblical lessons and that sort of thing. In their regular savings group meetings, the members experience a wonderful community around the concept of saving money together. It's something that they've never had that opportunity before. In these warm weather cultures, they never save anything. Their food grows year-round. It never gets cold there. They have never experienced the thing of growing food and then having to preserve your fruit so you can use it in the wintertime. And so they know nothing about saving. It's almost like, the Israelites, when they got the manna, gathered your manna for that day, and if you kept it overnight, it spoiled. In a warm weather climate, that's kind of in their culture. Any food you gather, you eat it that day, because if you keep it overnight, it might spoil. If you butcher your chicken one day, you eat it all. You don't let it go the next day because you don't have any way of preserving it, of keeping it from spoiling. So when money comes into their culture, they treat it the same way. You get paid, you go out and do a little bit of work and you get paid one day. You have to spend it because it might disappear or spoil or something if you kept it overnight. Now, we laugh at that. But that fits so much into their culture. The whole concept of saving is just so beyond them because it's not in their culture at all. When we first started the savings groups in Haiti, we gathered the people together and we told them, you're saving your own money, and your money has to stay in the savings until the end of the cycle, then you will get it back. After about 3 months of the savings groups, they had been saving money, and one day they came to a group meeting, and some of the people were getting really upset. And they started questioning the missionaries, and they said, when are you going to start giving us money? And we said, we told you at the beginning you were going to learn to save your own money. And it kind of comes out that most of the people had joined the savings group because they were convinced that that was a way to get money from the North Americans. And because their idea didn't come to pass, some of them got very upset. And some of them said, okay, we'll just quit coming to the savings groups. We want to get the money that we have saved. We want you to give that back to us. And we told them, remember, we decided you were going to save your own money. You get it out at the end of the cycle. So you can quit coming to the savings group. You don't have to save any more money. And you can come back to the last meeting and you can get your money out. But the money that you put into savings will stay in the savings until the end of the cycle. A few of them quit. Most of them stayed on. I am told that it took about a year for the whole concept of saving to sink into them and for them to understand what savings groups were doing for them. When it really hit with them, what do you do when you have something that really good is happening to you? You tell everybody you know, right? And you tell them they should be doing the same thing. They started telling their friends and relatives and neighbors all about savings groups, and pretty soon we had lots of people who wanted to become part of savings groups because of what it was doing. These savings groups gave them a resource that they never had before. Before, when they had a problem and they needed some money for medication or they needed some money for who knows for what, they had absolutely nobody to go to. What do you do when you run out of money and you need some money and you desperately need some money? Most of you are probably like me. You don't have any money, but you have a credit card, and so you pay for it with a credit card. Or you have a friend that'll loan you a little bit of money, or you have family that'll give you a little bit of money, or you're about ready to get your income tax rebate back, and so you wait till you get that. Or we have so many sources of money. These people in the poor villages, their only source of money was the North American missionaries who they had been dependent upon. "16 years later, in Haiti, we have grown from 2 savings groups to more than 780 savings groups. We have grown from somewhere around 30 savings group members to over 20,000 savings group meetings, savings group members. For the last 4 years in a row, starting with 2021, in Haiti, every year, our savings groups have saved more than $1 million. They don't have much money there. They can do it because it is so helpful to them. One of the keys of savings groups is the opportunity for savings group members to own their own savings groups, to do the work of saving their own money, and to be responsible as adults for what they are doing. For the last 200 years of mission work, we have struggled with figuring out ways for the churches that form in new cultures to belong to the people of that culture. The native people look at the church as the American church. They look at the money used in church as American money. In the savings groups, everything belongs to them, and they make the decision about their own money. Saving their own money gives the members a sense of value and dignity and freedom from dependency. The man in the blue shirt there is Merle Burkholder. One day he was visiting a savings group in Kenya, and after the savings group meeting was over, he was talking with one of the ladies, and he was asking her questions, and she was very excited about her savings group. Her savings group was just so wonderful, and Merle would ask her what they did with the money that they saved, and she just would tell him all about the different ways that they saved their money, and she was just so excited about the facilitator and the teaching that the facilitator was giving, and her savings group was just really, really special to her. And Merle kept asking questions, and she kept talking about her saving group. About 20 or 25 minutes later, the conversation was done, and when Merle walked away, he was a very excited man. He was excited about the fact that she had no concept that anything in her savings group had anything to do with anybody from North America. She had no concept that it was because of him that she had a savings group. Most of the savings group members around the world don't know that North Americans have anything to do with their savings group. And that makes it so wonderful for them because it's theirs. And what they learn in the savings group about God and about poverty being caused by broken relationships, they learn that from the perspective that this is the God that can be theirs. It's not the North American God. In October 2023, I was in Arthur, Illinois, to represent Open Hands at a Haiti benefit auction. I had a booth there at the auction that was very similar to what is in the back of your church here that you can look at afterwards. And Saturday morning of the Haiti benefit auction, I was sitting by my booth and nobody was coming by to try to find out about Open Hands, and so I got bored and I started wandering around the other mission booths. I came to one mission booth and there happened to be a man sitting there, and so I started talking to him. And as we talked, he said that they have some Open Hands savings groups in the area where their mission is. I found out that they were the mission that we started with in Haiti in 2009. Then I found out that the pastor of one of their churches is a man by the name of Roland, who is the top person in Open Hands savings groups in Haiti. And that was just all very interesting. And then this man said, savings groups have done wonders for our church people. And he said, before we had savings groups, it was just really bad. The dependency was just really bad. Whenever there was any kind of a small financial problem, all of the Haitians would come to the missionaries and they would beg for help and they would demand that we help them. And he said it was really bad. Then savings groups started. This was in the fall of 2023 when I was talking with this man. He said last summer of 2023, in Haiti, inflation was over 35%. Then he told me that sometime during the summer, some of the Haitian church leaders came to the mission. And they said something like this: inflation is really high. Our people are having trouble surviving. You can help us if you want to. And I don't know if that sinks into you or not, but these were people who 15 years before, for something way, way smaller than that, were come demanding help. These people, and this man blamed it on the savings groups, were no longer dependent on the mission because they had come and told the problem, but they were not demanding to be helped. And savings groups work. And it might take a little while for that to sink in, but they work. And they work because they are learning to worship God as a personal God that's not a North American God, and they realize that God has given them a few resources, and as they learn to save, they can survive. Let's move on. Where is Open Hands? Where do we have savings groups? That shows you all of the countries except one in which we have savings groups. The one that isn't shown on that map is our newest country, which is the country of Ghana in Africa. I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a little bit. We have three different areas that we have savings groups. This one we call Latin America, and Latin America, it's basically Central America, a little bit of South America, and then Haiti, which really is, it fits with Latin America, but it doesn't fit into South America or Central America. Haiti is the country that we started at first. It is the country where we are the biggest. We have the most groups there, and we have the most savings groups. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Haiti, but where the green markers there on the map, that's the areas where we have the 780 groups. In the northern area where the red markers are, we trained some facilitators there in September, and we are starting to have groups there. At this point, I am told we have about 40 groups started, but those groups have not sent us any records of their actually saving group meetings, where they are supposed to send us their records of attendance and their records of how much money is saved. The reason we want them to send it to us is so that we know for sure that the groups are actually meeting, and they haven't sent us any records of that yet. So those 40 groups are not included in the 780. They tell me that in northern Haiti, we could have as many groups there as we have in 5 or 6 years or 10 years. We might have as many groups there as we have in southern Haiti. No, we have a lot of opportunity to expand in Haiti. We have a few groups in Mexico. Mexico hasn't worked real well for savings groups. Savings groups work better some places than others. They tend to work best where money is in very short supply and people are very poor. They tell me that in Mexico they have a little bit of a welfare system. Savings groups do not work well where there is welfare. There are very, very few people who will get together in a group meeting to go to the hard work of saving money when you also have the alternative of getting a little money from welfare. That's just kind of how we as humans are. We're also in Guatemala and El Salvador. The last couple years we've had some new facilitators that we've trained that have been quite energetic in starting new groups, and there's been a fair amount of growth in both those countries in the last couple years. In 2022, I believe it was, we started some savings groups in Colombia, and one or two of the groups that we started was actually among Venezuelan refugees. And so from starting those groups, out of those groups we were able to train another Venezuelan to be a facilitator. And from that we've started a few groups some groups in Venezuela also. The second big area that we are at would be, we call it Southeast Asia. We are in 3 countries in Southeast Asia: India, Nepal, and Thailand. India was the first country we started in there. It was actually the second country that we started. India has been very up and down for savings groups. At one time we had, well, I don't know if anybody ever knows how many savings groups we actually had. One of the areas where we had savings groups, the Indian fellow that was kind of in charge of it, it was hard to get good records from him. And if you talked to him, he had over 1,000 groups. But he never would send records for having that many groups. And so it was just a little, but we've been a lot up and down. We're actually in an upswing now, and I'm excited about what's happening in India. In Nepal, we started there in 2018, and there has been very rapid growth. And I think Nepal is growing more quickly than our growth in Haiti. Thailand, which we started in 2021, is growing even quicker than Nepal. And I'm very excited about what's happening there. And it's just kind of the growth of groups. It's not because of the work that we do, it's because of the work that our native facilitators do. The third area is Africa, and we called it East Africa because that included those countries that are in the darker blue. But I need to pause just a little bit and tell you about Ghana, because Ghana is very special to me. And it's special to me because of my involvement in getting the group started. In 2002, I took a mission trip to Ghana. And I was there for 7 or 8 or 10 days. I'm not sure how long it was, but it was a good experience. In 2021, I became a part of Open Hands and started doing PR work for Open Hands. In 2023, in June, I was in northern Indiana for representing Open Hands at a Horse Progress Days. And the 2 days I was there, or the 2 nights I was there, I spent those nights with the man who had organized the mission trip to Uganda in 2002. And we spent a lot of time talking, and he was telling me about what was happening with the mission there. And I was telling him a lot about Open Hands and savings groups, and pretty soon he said, "Do you think savings groups would work in Ghana?" And I said, "I think they probably would." And I said, "Do you think we should try to put savings groups in Ghana?" And he said, "Yes." This was in June of 2023. In March of 2024, I went over to Ghana. We had a person from Kenya come over to Ghana, and we did a feasibility study. In September of 2024, the same 2 of us went over there, and then another fellow from the United States went, and we did a facilitator training where we trained 5 facilitators. There are now 9 groups in Ghana. And one thing I didn't tell you, and that is in 2020 I had a real bad fall, and it was kind of as a result of that fall is how I ended up becoming a part of Open Hands. The fall kind of knocked me out of everything that I was doing, and I quit doing a bunch of things that I had been doing before, and the opportunity opened up to become part of Open Hands. If I wouldn't have taken a mission trip to Ghana in 2002, and if I hadn't fallen in 2020, they would still not have savings groups in Ghana, because there would have been no connection between Ghana and Open Hands. And I feel honored that I had an opportunity to be involved in that. I wish I wouldn't have had to fall for that to happen, because that wasn't a very pleasant experience. But it's just interesting to me how God makes things work. The first country in Africa where we had savings groups would have been Kenya, and we have it combined with Tanzania, because Tanzania is the lower country of the 2, and the only savings groups we have in Tanzania are right close to the border. It is our 2nd largest country for both members and a number of groups, and it started a few years after Haiti, and it actually has grown just a tiny bit faster than Haiti. We're also in Uganda, and some of you may be wondering, are the Open Hands savings groups just like the SALT savings groups? Christian Aid Ministries has savings groups within their SALT program. The savings groups work basically the same and use the same, they have kind of their own manual that they produce, but basically uses the same manual. In SALT, the SALT savings groups were going on in Cambodia, or in Uganda. The mission that was helping run those decided that they decided their ministry time in Uganda was up, and so they ended up leaving Uganda. So Christian Aid Ministries came to Open Hands and said, "Would you like to take over these savings groups?" And so we did, and that's how we got started in Uganda. The last country is Ethiopia. Ethiopia was one that I think started about 2016 or 17, and I think we've had somewhere in the 20s of groups just about the whole time there. There hasn't been a whole lot of growth with that. 3 years ago, I went to visit over in Kenya, and it was not real long after I had started working with Open Hands. I went so I could start to understand how Savings Group worked and that sort of thing. Part of what I went over for was for a facilitator training, which is when we get all the facilitators together. We try to do that twice a year and give them additional training and kind of let them interact with each other and help each other out. And there were about 50 facilitators there. And as I was going around and talked to the different facilitators, my first question was usually, do people come to Christ in your savings groups? And invariably, with a big smile on their face, they would tell me yes. And it happens, and it consistently happens. You might say, well, aren't they Christian already? And the answer to that is not necessarily. When we first started our savings groups in Haiti, we worked with missions there, and we would start the groups usually with people from the Anabaptist churches. But when they started telling their friends and relatives and neighbors who may have been Anabaptist, may have been some other kind of Christian, may have not been a Christian, may have even done a little bit of voodoo, who knows? God, when He instructed us to help the poor, did not ever once imply that you should only help the poor that are in your culture or the poor that you know real well. We decided as an organization that anybody who wanted to be a part of a savings group, regardless of their religion or their spiritual, what was happening within them spiritually, could become part of a savings group. That's what we decided. And when groups start, there are routinely people who do not have a good relationship with God. And at times, they come to Christ. When I was talking with one of the facilitators about that, he said, I started a savings group one place because they wanted to start a savings group. We had our savings group and it was going well. And about 6 months after we started, the members of the savings group came to me and they said, we don't have a church in our area. Will you come start a church? He said, I went and started a church. The church has been functioning for 2 or 3 years and is doing very well. The Open Hands mission is to follow God's command to open our hands to the poor. As that happens, evangelism happens. We do not do standing on the street corner and preaching and trying to evangelize that way. But within the savings group, evangelism happens. And I don't have time this evening to tell you more stories, but there are places in the world where savings groups are very much an evangelistic tool for reaching particularly Muslims. In Bangladesh, there are some CAM savings groups, some SALT savings groups in northern Bangladesh where all of the members of the savings groups are practicing Muslims from a Muslim community. And what the savings groups do for them, they really, really like it, and they know they are getting a little bit of Christian teaching involved in that. But the savings groups, what the savings groups do for that, they are willing to be a part of that, even though it is Christian. One of the things we teach in savings groups is that poverty is caused by broken relationships with God, with others, with yourself, and with God's creation. Over and over again, we find savings group members having their relationships with God restored and also having their relationship with themselves restored. And as they learn to save money, they get their relationship with God's creation restored. I don't hear many stories about restored relationships with other people. I'm sure it happens. I just don't hear the stories of it, and I don't have the opportunity to see the evidence of it because I can go visit their savings groups and we don't necessarily see that. But relationships with themselves. When I was in Nepal a year and a half ago, I was there also for a facilitator training, and while we were there, we visited 5 or 6 different savings groups. At the savings groups, we asked the members of the savings group, towards the end of the group meeting, we asked them, what have savings groups done for you? And so they would have different people get up and talk about what the savings groups had done for them. And in 2 different groups, a lady stood up and spoke, and then it was translated to us, and in each case it was translated, the savings groups have given me more confidence. When I came back home and I thought about that a number of times, and I came to the conclusion that what they were saying was, the savings groups have made me realize that I have something that I can contribute and something that I can do that is worthwhile. I don't know that any of us have ever been poor to the place that we are dependent on somebody like the North American missionaries and that sort of thing. We don't understand what life is like for that type of people. Those people are told by everybody that they are worthless, that they can't do anything, that they can't accomplish anything. And that is what they think, that they just can't do anything. They can't accomplish anything. And that's why they become dependent on the North American missionaries, because the North American missionaries have money and they can help them, but they are just worthless. They become a part of a savings group. They go to the hard discipline of saving their money. They get to the end of the cycle, and the money that they saved gets handed back to them. They have a lump sum of money that's bigger than any lump sum of money that they've ever had in their life. It gives them more confidence. It makes them realize that they are worth something. I'll try to make it short. I've got a little sermonette for you. You all know about the golden rule, right? Do unto others as you would have others do to you, or therefore all things whatsoever you would that men should do to you, do you even so to them. For this is the law and the prophets. That's what was taught back in the Old Testament. You do for others what you want others to do for you. Something that has become vivid to me in the last year and a half is what one of those whatsoevers is. And the reason it's become vivid to me is because it's become practical in my life. You know, one of the things that I want other people to do for me, I want them to treat me like I have value, like I'm worth something. And I'm going to guess that every one of you feel the same way. And I'm not talking about pride. I am talking about having people treat you like you are worth something. We all want it. In fact, I'm coming to the conclusion that that's kind of what love is. How do you love your neighbor as yourself? You treat them like they have value. How do you love your wife? You treat her like she has value. Even when she says something that you just can't figure out what it means and why she could possibly be saying that. You don't use your human reasoning and say, how can you say something so stupid? I'm sorry, but you're not treating your wife as though she has value. If you ever tell her she's thinking like she's thinking like a stupid lady, and if you ever tell her that, I am going to guess that she really, 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 really questions whether you really love her. That was a little bit of a sidetrack. God has been leading me through a series of things to help me realize how important it is to treat people as though they have value. To treat my wife that way, to treat my children like that. Those of you that have children, I'm going to guess that you find it easier to treat your obedient child as though he has value than your disobedient child. I'm going to have to admit that I've done that in the past, because that's kind of the way our human minds think. We value things that are of value to us. Our obedient children are much more valuable to us than our disobedient child, because our disobedient child can be very unvaluable to us. Because if they're disobedient in public, that just is horrible for people who are going to think that I'm a terrible parent because of... And anyway, I'll quit talking about that. We need to treat people. We need to treat poor people like they have value. Savings groups do that. I could talk to you a fair amount. I have a whole sermon that I preach about this, and I'm trying to do it in 5 minutes. But if I follow the golden rule, if I want to be treated as having value, I must treat others as though they have value. It can be really difficult. I have people in my life right now that it is a real struggle to know how to treat them as though they have value. Jesus, one day, he and his disciples were traveling through Samaria. They stopped at Jacob's well. The disciples went into town. The Samaritan woman came by. Jesus said to the woman, "Give me to drink." With those 4 words, Jesus told that woman that she has value. Changed her perspective on life. She said, "Jesus, why are you treating me like you are?" Then they started talking about where to worship God and where's the best way to worship God and who the Messiah is. And pretty soon she believed that Jesus was the Messiah. And then a bunch of Samaritans believed that Jesus was the Messiah. Because Jesus, instead of saying, "You despicable Samaritan, immoral woman, you give me some water." Instead of saying that, he said, "Give me to drink." In a way that she interpreted that as she was of value. I am convinced that if you have people in your life that have different political opinions than you have, different opinions about how you should do things in church, different opinions about all sorts of things, if you treat them as though they have value, that will transform your relationship with that person. Sermonette is done. What can Open Hands do for the Northwoods Mennonite Church? What can the Northwoods Mennonite Church do for Open Hands? Open Hands gives you the opportunity to follow God's command to give to the poor without creating dependency. When you give to Open Hands, your giving will make a difference. When you give $35, you are giving one person somewhere in the world the opportunity to be part of a savings group for 1 year. Your money does not go directly to the person in poverty in a material way. Instead, they have the opportunity to have value as a person, to get relationships restored and gain hope for this world. You say, you don't put any money into the savings. Why does Open Hands need money? Well, it costs a fair amount to fly over to Kenya and to organize a facilitator training and to pay the facilitators. We have over 250 facilitators who are scattered around the world that we pay for their time for facilitating the savings groups, and it just costs some money. But what you give to us will not go in a material way to a poor person. So you're going to have to change a little bit your Anabaptist perspective of how to give to the poor if you give to Open Hands. I had an Amish businessman one time, the first question he asked me, he said, how much, if I give to Open Hands, how much of my money will go directly to the poor? I had to tell him nothing, because it doesn't. Now, it's entirely different than Red Cross or Salvation Army or something like that, where a big percentage just goes to, I realize that, but none of it will go directly to the poor. But it does far better than that. Gives them the opportunity to learn how to save, to learn about God and restoring relationships, and to learn that they are a person that has value. Open Hands gives you a chance to give where it makes a difference. You can give to Open Hands so that we can train facilitators and help them run the savings groups. Second question, what can you do? You can pray with Open Hands that when God gives us opportunities to start savings groups in new countries, we can have the opportunity to respond to those opportunities. You can give so that people have an opportunity to become part of savings groups, and so that Open Hands can expand and grow. You can give us referrals to missions that you might be involved in, who has a terrible problem with dependency, and where savings groups might work to help them in their setting overcome dependency. I have been with Open Hands for 4 years. Financially, we are in solid shape. We have enough money for the savings groups that we are working with right now. But God has opened us new opportunities to expand and grow. This current fiscal year that started July 1st of 2024, the expectations was that we would have a 54% growth in number of groups. It looks like now it'll probably be about 45% growth. So we are growing. We have enough money to cover all of that. About a year ago, Joe Kipfer, our executive director, I was talking to him on the phone, and he said, it could be in 10 years we will be 10 times as big, which means our $1.5 million budget might be $10 million. And so my goal is to make it so that we'll never have an opportunity to go into Ghana, a place like Ghana, to start savings groups, and have to say, we'll have to pause on that for a little bit until we raise a little bit more money so we can go do that. On the other hand, I have told our mission leadership that if we ever get to the place where we have too big of a stockpile of money, I am going to tell the congregations that I talk to that they're not supposed to give us any, because we have everything that we need, because the last thing that I want us to do is have so much money in our mission that we start making poor decisions about how we spend that money. Because unfortunately, I have seen missions do that sort of thing. We have savings groups in 14 countries around the world. In each savings group, they save their own money. We don't put any of our money into that. We pay the facilitators their stipend and their travel costs. We have more than 250 facilitators, more than 2,100 groups, but God is just providing. Looks like my time has passed up. I'm ready to close. After the meeting, I'm going to be standing back by, I'm not going to give you an opportunity to ask questions now, for 2 reasons. I'm already over time a little bit. And also, my wife doesn't like it when I ask for questions because she says, Paul, it takes you too long to answer a question. And she said, there's probably people there that are not interested at all in the question, and you should not make them stay in and listen to you answer a question that they don't want to listen to. So, if you have questions, I'll be standing back there by my booth, and I love to answer questions. And I would say that I'd stand back there for an hour to answer your questions, except I have one other problem, and that is I leave from the Minneapolis airport at 6:30 tomorrow morning. And I want to get left here by 20 minutes till 9 so I can get down there to my motel by a little after 11 o'clock tonight so I can at least get 4 or 5 hours of sleep before I have to get on the airplane tomorrow morning. So I'll be standing back there by the booth. I will answer any questions as long as I'm able to get packed up and left by a 8:45. So it's been good being here. Thank you for how well you listened. And I think that your church has broken a record for presentations that I have done. And that is for how many people came out to listen to me at a midweek service. I don't think I have ever had the percentage of the pews as full for a midweek service as I have had this evening. So thank you. It's been good being here.